I'd say that has come out of this is that, we were all brought into each other's homes and we all saw this different side of people. And it also made people more aware that we have lives outside of just our office, and these lives affect how we perform sometimes in our job.
Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to Architecting.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm the host, Adam Wagner, and I have here my very talented architect wife, Rebekah Wagoner. Hey, Rebekah, who do we have on the show today?
Hey, I'm actually really excited about the show today because today's guests are actually the co-managing directors at my firm, Gensler.
This is some small startup called Gensler.
Yeah, you may not have heard of it.
Yep, we finally got somebody from your office on here, and we had a really fun conversation with them, just talking about sort of how they work together with their sort of personalities and skill sets, and just their very varied backgrounds that got them here. We talk a little bit about the sort of biggest issues I think are facing architecture, and they give some advice to young architects and women coming up in the profession. And we also had we talk a good amount about how Jon hired you and not me. A happy decision, I think.
Well, as an employee of 6 years, I am a big fan of both these people, Jon Gambrill and Michelle Liebling.
Yeah, that's their names.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a good talk. It was a little weird. My microphone broke right before the interview, and the audio quality wasn't great, and we were all kind of frazzled a little bit. And I think, something else that I've been wanting to kind of talk about a little bit is that I think in this episode I say something about how I'm coming off. I'm feeling like cold, or I'm feeling stressed or stretched thin. This episode was recorded back in the beginning of February, and I think at that point and now, like, I just have I had a lot going on, and staying up with the podcast and running a firm and teaching and being a good father and husband and keeping up with everything. Since then, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and it was something that's kind of a lot more complex than I thought that was before. And so I had to kind of, since then, kind of take a step back and have a little more critical overview of my life and sort of mental health in some ways, and just been working with professionals to bring more balance into my life. I'd been thinking about reaching out to a therapist or a doctor for kind of a long time, but never did. I guess I always felt like I was too busy or sort of scared. But since then, I've gotten some more help in different ways, and seen a really big and kind of profound change in my life and mental health and general kind of perspective. And so, I think I've been talking with a lot of architects, especially through COVID, and it seems like a lot of people are really struggling with sort of mental health and just kind of priorities and what's going on. And so, I would just suggest to anybody to try to get whatever help they can. I'm definitely no expert, but feel free to reach out to me as well if you want to talk about kind of next steps or something like that. I'll probably keep talking about this a little bit more, just because I've seen such benefits. But like Jon says in this interview, architecture is a really hard profession, and it's easy to think, or it's easy to see people and think that they're succeeding really well, but everyone struggles, and try to get the help that you can.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, yeah, so enjoy the episode. It was a fun one. I've been wanting to razz Jon about not hiring me for a while, so I finally have it recorded. Enjoy.
Many of our listeners are familiar with Herman Miller, a 100-plus-year-old company known for its rich legacy in modern designs, ergonomics, and thought leadership. For Colorado, Workplace Resource is the certified platinum dealership representing Herman Miller, and we are proud to support the Colorado design community. Whether you are in the market for a functional and stylish home office setup or exploring a broader solution to outfit your entire workplace, we are the partner you can trust. The local teams with Herman Miller and Workplace Resource can connect you with research and insights, create a high-performing work environment, especially in this current shift with the way we work. We encourage you to explore our Future of Work Hub for more information, and the link is in the bio. Conceptual thought starters. Not sure what type of solution works best? Browse our planning ideas to start the conversation. You can download Revit files and full tools to really help dial in your solution for your floor plan. And lastly, full project design, specification, and installation for small businesses to full campuses. Workplace Resource is really the place to begin. Be sure to connect with our team. We look forward to supporting our design partners in the Colorado community. And in the meantime, please enjoy architecting.
Hey, we're happy to be sponsored by Modern in Denver magazine. For over a decade, they've been crafting fantastically curated content on Colorado designers and projects, spreading the gospel of good design within our region.
And I love how the goal of Modern in Denver aligns with the goal of this podcast, to better build up and connect the community of Colorado designers. So go buy a copy of the magazine at your local bookstand, subscribe to their weekly email list, and follow them on Instagram.
Check it out. I had this planned thing where I was going to come in with you guys and be like, I am just falling apart. I am totally frazzled. I feel dead, and I have a firm of 2. How do you do it with an actual firm? And then on top of that, we had all this tech issues where my computer stopped working, my microphone stopped working. You're late, but now we're here. We can all breathe.
Deep breaths.
And we're on.
Yeah, how do you do it? It's called deep breaths.
Deep breaths in the beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Wine.
So yeah, what has your Fridays look like?
This month it's been great. I mean, this month's been weird. I feel like I've been playing catch up. I had COVID 3 weeks ago now. I tested basically 3 weeks ago. I tested positive, and it's productivity went down, and then I came back up, and then I took Monday and Tuesday off and went and had some fun, and
nice.
I'm just so behind. So my Fridays are I need it to be Tuesday.
Yeah. Michelle was saying it was just this miraculous thing where you healed just in time for your ski trip. But
I was so excited. I've been tested negative all week, or positive all week. And then the day I'm getting a car to drive to Crested Butte, I tested negative.
Nice.
So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
What about you, Michelle? How's Friday been?
It's a lot of meetings, right? So, but I try really hard to have a little bit of open time at the end of the day so that I can catch up, because it's hard to enjoy your weekend when you feel like you're behind on a Friday. So, trying to block out the end of the day in order to catch up on a lot of things. But, it starts all over again. That hamster wheel starts all over again.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, good. This podcast is actually called "Just Teach Adam How to Be an Architect and Run a Firm." So I'm glad you guys are on here, and we'll have all the answers.
I like the transparency.
Oh yeah. So what I first like to start it off awkwardly and make you answer this weird question of who are you, and figure out however you want to answer that. So, Michelle, who are you?
Oh gosh, I will tell you that is one of the hardest things for me to answer. It's very difficult for me to talk about myself in general. I did pre-warn Jon, not that he doesn't know that already, but Well, let's see. We talked a little bit earlier. I am a mom. That's a huge part of who I am. And then I'm a partner. Jon and I have been partners a long time now. And I think a big part of how I show up every day is as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, as a friend, problem solver. I mean, we wear a lot of hats in our job, that's for sure.
Jon, how about you? How would you answer that?
So I've got this nagging cough, so I'll apologize now as one of the kind of lingering remnants of being sick a few weeks ago. But
of COVID or of skiing?
COVID.
What's it lingering from? Yeah.
COVID. Have you interviewed Jesse Adkins? Anybody from SAR?
I interviewed Chris Shears.
Okay, so he mentioned this to me, and it's really true. I'm a Swiss Army knife, the 100 attachment option. So it's in a lot of ways exactly what Michelle said. I'm a dad. I'm a friend. I'm a parent. 2 kids. But then in the office, from being holding client relationships and building friendships with clients to being a mentor, being a coach, being a project architect, to being a fireman and putting out fires. I mean, it runs the gamut.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So, Jon, starting with you, like, how'd you become that Swiss Army knife? Where'd you grow up? What were you around?
What was I around? Midwest. You got a couple of Midwestern folks here. I grew up in Northern Ohio. And I don't know, thanks to my parents, a strong work ethic, dedication. A lot of that was part of growing up. My first job was mowing 5 or 6 neighborhood lawns, saving up. I mean, I had to buy my cleats, I had to buy my skis growing up, doing all those kind of things. I think some of that evolves, and then just the different relationships you have from high school and those experiences to college to work to internships to the first time you really fail on a project and how you pick. I mean, all of those come into the different little attachments that you get to have. I'm definitely going to owe Jesse a few drinks if he listens to this.
So what were you in terms of, like, what were you around? Like, what did your parents do? And was architecture a thing that you saw and something you sort of directed yourself towards, or did you kind of fall into it?
My dad sold tires. My mom was a housewife and then eventually sold spices. So, no, like, architecture was, I'm probably more typical from that perspective. I took a drafting class in high school, and a project was to design your house. So design a house, and I drew my house. It was in an awful 70s suburban home. But I had an art teacher that said, hey, you should really think about it, because I really liked art and I was good at math. So all the stereotypes. And I got enamored by the University of Cincinnati. And they had this internship program, and they were celebrating kids that, while they're in college, would go to Germany or go to Los Angeles. And I remember leaning over to my mom, telling my mom, yeah, I'm going to do that. And but I narrowed down all my choices, and my choices were to go to the University of Cincinnati for architecture if I got in, and it wasn't easy to get in, even though it was a state school, or to go to University of Miami, Ohio for business.
Right.
And I got into Cincinnati, so I went to Cincinnati, and in reality, I really liked it. So I think somehow I'm one of the anomalies, right? That, somebody who goes to college for something specific and then ends up really enjoying it. And I've never thought about leaving the industry.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a really interesting program. I just had Mark Swackhammer on. I don't know if you knew him, but he also went to Cincinnati and was talking about that a lot, and that idea of really working a lot while you're in school. It seemed fairly unique, you know. Did you know you were getting into that, and what did you sort of get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I knew the internship program, so I knew I would get the work experience out of it. What you don't really know is, well, what does that really mean? What does that look like? And it was, I mean, the school was there was plenty of theory, it really taught you design. And then the practical experience that you get from work of what's it really like to walk into a job and you've never done work as a intern architect, and you're building models and you're doing drawings and you're picking up red lines, whatever it is, through the various experience, you get that practicality. So when you graduated college, it was, you really kind of felt like you hit the ground running.
Yeah. Michelle, so he said a couple of Midwesterners. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Louis, and then I spent, after college, about 14 years in Chicago before moving here. So huge part of my life in the Midwest before moving here almost, I guess, 13 years ago.
Nice. Well, we're going to make you talk about yourself a lot more, so you can't skip that far ahead. So St. Louis, were you around design? Did you grow up around design as a child, and kind of got you towards this track?
It wasn't something that actually registered until I was older. My grandmother was an interior designer in New York. And when we were kids and we'd go stay with her, she had all these little plastic templates shaped, with the chair and the sofa, and we played with those all the time. I was sort of fascinated by those things. She had really beautiful fabrics and materials, and then her house was just so interesting, and I think at the time that was just my grandmother. When I went to college, architecture, interior design, it wasn't even on my radar. I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. I was taking history and psychology and just a whole slew of classes that was not holding my interest at all. Finally, my junior year, I was meeting with one of the career counselors, I suppose, and she just asked me all these questions, and it just brought me to the place, so I started taking design classes, and I felt like this is where I need to be. Finally, everything kind of made sense. It did take me a little bit longer to graduate from college when you choose your major as a junior. But it just kind of fell into place after that.
So that was at University of Missouri? And so you graduated with interior architecture degree, or? Yeah.
Yep. It was, I think, I think they've changed what the major is called a variety of different times, or what the degree is since then. But yeah, essentially interior architecture.
So did you feel more prepared going into that program with sort of 3 years of very varied education? And did it seem like you had maybe a different experience than some of your classmates who might have gone straight through?
I don't know. I mean, I was a very well-rounded student, that's for sure. Having been in a variety of different schools within the college, and trying a variety of different things. So I did have a pretty broad experience base. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure I thought about it as an advantage compared to the other students.
What was your sort of biggest takeaway from that program? I think, at least at Kansas State, there's an interior architecture program, which is very different from like an interior design program. And I assume that might have been the same way at University of Missouri. Sort of what were the surprising things that you took away from that education?
Well, it was I think, an interesting time to go to school in the sense that we were just starting to experiment with technology that is now just ubiquitous. And Jon, maybe that's similar for you. I mean, we were just starting to do AutoCAD. We were just starting to be introduced to some of the more robust rendering programs and things like that. I did have a job at an architecture firm where we were, was really where I was a lot deeper in some of the technical programs and things like that. But it was just, looking back there, it was an interesting time because there was this transition from hand rendering to more computer-based communication. So looking back, it was literally this sort of pivot point, I think. And when I started working, there wasn't really that hand rendering was sort of on the outs, and everybody was starting to look at it being more technology based. And so being on the just at the beginning of that, in a way, I wasn't as experienced as probably somebody who graduated 3, 4, 5 years later than me.
It's you're only on that cutting edge for about that first year that you graduate, right? And then you're obsolete again.
Maybe two.
Yeah, I mean,
Me too.
I think that,
It depends where you go.
yeah, I mean, talking a little bit about Jon's experience at Cincinnati. I mean, I do believe that I had a great experience in college for a variety of different reasons, but the whole basis of my experience and is the first several jobs that I had. I mean, I think that there's a reason that there is this whole apprenticeship idea with architecture and design, because everything I learned is really from those first few firms I worked at.
So how did that happen? So you graduated, you had some internships in school, and what was next? Where'd you go?
Then I packed up and went to Chicago. I had some friends that lived up there, and to be honest, I was like 19, 20 years old. I do not remember the thought process exactly that went into that, but I did just pick up and move to Chicago, and started looking for a job. It was a difficult time. This was like 1996. It wasn't super easy at that particular time to get a job. I started temping, actually, and then did that for a while until I found my first job there, which was at this firm called BOA Associates. And then I worked there for a few years. It was a big firm. A few years ago, they were bought by Stantec, actually. I worked there for a few years, and then started working for a firm called Gary Lee Partners. And I think that was really the most formative experience that I had. The people that I worked with are still some of the most talented people I know, still very dear friends of mine that I see and spend time with whenever I'm in Chicago. And that was about 5 years there.
And so now, Jon, so you have this experience in Cincinnati. You graduate. What happens then?
Well, so
you woke up in Chicago as well?
Not quite, almost. Not quite.
Yeah.
So I through Cincinnati with the internship, I took advantage of it. I mean, I did what I told my mom I was going to do, and I got the opportunity. I lived and worked in New York. I lived and worked in London. They offered a travel semester. I took off and traveled Europe and Turkey and did that for a couple months. I lived and worked in LA, and then I lived and worked in Chicago in the 6-year program that is University of Cincinnati, and then graduated. And
wow.
A lot of my classmates, I'm going back here, or I'm going here. And I remember I received one job offer, and that was from the firm I worked at in New York City. And it was really low. And I couldn't stomach kind of living there and living in a really small unit with 3-4 people, which is how we lived as interns when we moved out there. So I bartended through college. So when I graduated, I kept my bartending job, and I framed homes. So I became a carpenter and did that for, I don't know, about 9 months. It was the middle of the winter. And after, pounding my thumbs with a hammer a few times, I said, I have a college degree. I'm going to go get a job inside. And still kept my bartending job and worked for a kind of a small developer design builder group. And they did a lot of light industrial type projects. And while I was with them, they ventured and did their first commercial office building. And they had a design group of 3 people, and I was one of those 3. And then they had a kind of a technical group of about 8 that would do all the CDs. So, and they were on opposite ends of the building. I mean, a horrible process. So where the design group would sit over here, and then they'd give and you would never talk about it again. You just go on to the next design thing, and then they would just execute from there. And then one day I just kind of got tired of Cincinnati, and I upped and moved to Chicago and worked for a general contractor. And was kind of allured because a really good friend of mine still lives in Chicago. Said, you got to come to Chicago, come work with us, get this experience. And I did. And I did more pre-construction work in today's terminology, and some project management work, and did that for about 1.5 years. And it was they're not in business anymore, which is a good thing, because I learned a lot of the scrupulous things that contractors could do. I've watched one guy white out a bid that he got and change the numbers to put it in his open book stuff. So it was not enjoyable from that perspective, but I learned a ton. And then at the time, I met a girl who's now my wife, and she was talking about moving back to Denver, and I didn't want to work for that contractor anymore. So I went back and got a 9-month master's at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Didn't really need it, but I was exploring what would teaching be like. And I think 2 weeks in, I realized I'm not a teacher. I'm trying, TAing a theory class at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And so did that for 9 months. And as soon as I graduated, we moved out to Denver. So my wife, who's from here, was moving home.
What's that program? A 9-month program?
So that's kind of, at the time, I think they've changed. I mean, in the architecture program, I graduated at Cincinnati with a full bachelor's. And at the time, somebody with a full bachelor's could go back and get a master's of architecture in 1 year. So 9 months, start in September and finish in May. And University of Illinois' program was that. There were other programs that were 2 years and some programs that were 3 years. And so I just took the opportunity to get out of working for that general contractor and end up with a master's.
You had one more slot open on your Swiss Army knife, and you had to fill it with another degree.
It was only a 6 or a 7 tool knife at that point.
Yeah. Past then, it's like one of those full Leathermen that just really bulges in your pocket.
Right.
So Michelle, you're hanging out in Chicago. How'd you make it? How'd you make it to Denver?
All these years in Chicago, the winters can sort of get you. And there were a few years where it was just really bad. I mean, you don't leave your house, or it's so painfully cold.
Even with your inside jobs, you're not even pounding nails, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you're waiting for the L, or you're walking, a mile to the office from where the L's. I mean, you still are outside a lot. but I came out to Colorado with some family, and we went skiing for the weekend. And afterward, flying back to Chicago, there was some kind of spark that just made me think, well, what if I lived there? What would that be like if I lived in Colorado?
What if I had more sun? Yeah.
And I just started saying that more, and then all of a sudden, once you sort of put that out there, things start to happen. And I asked a friend of mine who actually worked for Gensler if he knew any firms in Denver, and he said, well, Gensler. And he arranged a dinner with me and one of the principals in the Chicago office of Gensler. And at that time, the Denver office was part of the North Central region. So the hub office was actually Chicago. And so we had dinner, and basically he offered me a job at that dinner to move to Denver. And I came out, and I did a house hunting trip, and I met several of the people in the office. And like I said, one thing just led to another, and it just started happening. And so I bought a house, sold my house, and moved out here.
And got the job at Gensler. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I spent about 6 months in the Chicago office of Gensler as I started to get things ready to move out here. But
yeah, I think you guys are interesting. Where I've had partners on before, but they've always been partners who have founded a firm together, right? And I've been like slightly nervous about how this goes, where you sort of have divergent stories, but then it comes together at Gensler. And now, I think it's really interesting to me of how you're sort of co-running this firm. So, Jon, how did you land here at Gensler?
Excuse me. So
he was smoking a big cigarette.
Yeah, right.
Try to calm down.
So, in some ways, it's not special. Knowing I was going to come out move to Denver while I was in grad school, I came out to Denver a handful of months earlier. I'd done some research. I had met with a few people in Chicago that knew of the Denver market, and they recommended a few firms. And at the time, I mean, this was 2000, June. So it was the spring, late winter of 2000, and there was a huge hiring boom. And I interviewed at 6 firms, got 6 job offers, which is nothing special because everybody was growing, part of the .com bubble and what was kind of coined at that time. And my internships while I was at the University of Cincinnati were a lot of corporate type companies. And Gensler was one of the 6, and they were the one I ended up choosing, in part because of for me at the time, it was, we have the opportunity to where you can do work in other offices. And if we get slow, that's how we and I really bought into that, not so much as a job protection if we get slow, but more of, all right, I'm going to move to Denver and I could work in other offices. And that was in June of 2000. And within the first 3-4 years, I was back in Chicago. I had living in a corporate apartment for like 3 months off and on, helping with work. We had the opportunity from Denver to do a lot of work in China. And I was going back and forth and working on projects internationally. So it was actually everything I was looking for, that I was nervous about. Would I really get that type of experience working for a firm in Denver? And interviewed at the firms that I thought you would. And the firm's been really good. It's grown a ton. The office has grown a ton, but I've always felt like there's a different experience around the next corner. And hence I've been here for 22 years.
Yeah. Michelle, this isn't my first interview with Jon. Early on, I had an initial interview, and I made one big mistake, and I brought along my more talented wife, and that one got hired, and I did not. And but so obviously, I know a lot about Gensler through my wife, and every time I see Jon, he always whispers to me, "I got the better one," and I don't always appreciate that, but I mean, he is true. But
Inside joke.
Inside joke, yeah. So yeah, obviously through Rebekah, I know a lot about Gensler, but I think, give me a pitch. Why is Gensler good? Tell me about Gensler. One of you, or you're like, yeah, you probably have the marketing thing right there. You could like read from it, but I think more for me, like maybe the question is, it's good that you hired Rebekah, because I probably wouldn't have lasted very long. I don't last very long at firms, and I like to sort of have my own firms and have smaller things, and that's a very different experience from a more corporate firm, and obviously there's sort of pros and cons to each of those, and I think I see a lot of benefits to Gensler in the way that they work, and sort of like the different experience of that firm. So pitch me on that.
So one of the reasons I was pausing to see how Michelle would jump in and answer that, because I think I
was pausing to see how Jon would jump in and answer that.
But part of it is who we're talking to, right? I think that's one of the really interesting things about Gensler is if it's a client. I think one of the things to say is, because we're a research-driven organization, and the amount of effort that the firm puts forth, and every office in the firm puts forth, to share what we're seeing on a project type by project type basis, would inform knowledge, and that knowledge then gets built into the work that we do. And that was kind of how we would talk about it even 15, 18 years ago, as I started to learn being with the firm. And now the firm is so much more intentional about the research that we do and the publications that we put out, that we can really bring world-class architecture to every market that we're doing work in, because the firm is also so small, especially as you get to a leadership level, to where we know, Michelle and I know, and other leaders in the office know almost people in every office to call to get direct expertise. And the firm is so wired to answering the phone and being a part of those conversations, to where quick conversations can make profound impacts on projects. So from a client side, I think that's one of the big pitches. But we're still local. We're still in our backyard. And we still can compete from that local perspective in our market.
I think there's a misperception sometimes, a firm of our size and what it means to be quote unquote corporate, because we still are this network of 50 smallish offices, some very large, but this really connected, collaborative network of offices. And the firm, you've probably heard this, Adam, the notion of the one firm. And I think because of the organic growth of the firm, and not buying other firms, and not growing in that way, there is this really strong culture to where you can't just pick up the phone and call anybody in any other office, and there's already this baseline understanding because we have such a strong culture, but everybody is really willing to help and contribute to the success of others. And that I think that before working at Gensler, I've never seen that type of collaboration before on a firm of our size, or heard of any collaboration like that in a firm of our size.
Yeah. And so how does it work in the Denver office? So how's the office sort of broken up, and how do you two sort of co-lead it? you can't both wait for each other to talk. One of you has to talk.
Well, I hate it. Like Michelle
talk.
just did what I always feel like I'm bumbling through a response or something like that, and then Michelle speaks, and it's so eloquent, and it's I'm always like, oh, I wish I would have said that.
No.
What was the question?
So how's the firm broken up?
I can start. So Jon and I are co-managing directors of the office, and then we have 2 studios, each co-led. So there's one of the studios that we call WorkFlex 1 because it's a variety of practices, and then another studio, WorkFlex 2, because it's a variety of practices. And so Jon and I co-managing director, and then each of those have co-leaders as well. And other than that, it's a group of leaders that are given opportunities to lead. So in a way, I'd say that we have that structure that I just mentioned, but we're also flat in a sense that we give leaders the opportunity to lead without necessarily having to be told to all the time. We provide a runway and room for people to step up and lead.
It's something I'd add to, and this isn't a Denver only. I mean, the firm believes in a co-leadership model, and we weren't always a co-leadership model in Denver, but it is an acknowledgement that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and that's, even though Michelle and I are very similar in a number of ways, we do have strengths that are different, and that's another benefit, and it helps us as we talk and debate on issues and solve problems and develop kind of strategy about how we're going to progress and proceed. So that's another kind of important fact. And even down from architecture and interiors perspectives, I'm much more operational and technically minded. Michelle's a design director, and her people approach is probably arguably a little bit stronger than mine, though I think we both have strengths in that category. So that's another acknowledgement. And even into the studio structure, we have co-studio leaders, and we are thoughtful about strengths and weaknesses, even from making sure that we're pairing people that we think turn into really good partners.
Yeah. And so, Michelle, you had all these different work experiences, and sort of brought you to this point with Gensler. What's a project at Gensler that's really stood out to you, in sort of maybe best capturing this working system of Gensler and your sort of like design and leadership style, and it really knocked it out of the park in its built form?
One of the most rewarding projects was our own office. I mean, they took Revit away from me after that. And I don't get to do CDs anymore or actually draw anything, but that was a really rewarding project for so many reasons. One, it was because it was significant milestone in our leadership, the transition to our leadership of the office. So there was a little bit of symbolism there, but we had a large team working on that project, and being able to bring a group of people together in a really collaborative manner in a way that resulted in this place that we are able to do our best work, out of this place that we collectively designed is really rewarding. And Jon, when was that? 5 years ago? Has it been 5 years?
I think it's been like 8.
I mean, there are 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's been longer than I've been in Denver, and so at least 6 or 7.
I think we're coming up on 7 years in
5
the
years
office.
Before the pandemic.
5 years before the blackness, yeah.
Yeah, but so to me that is that was one of the most rewarding projects.
Yeah, and it works really well, and I think on a lot of different levels, right? And of thinking about sort of collective, different scales of collective work and of gathering and working, and
Well, there's a really great experience when you design a space for your client, and then you get to actually go experience the space by having meetings in there, or whatever it might be for you to experience that space. And we get to do that every day in our own office, and so that's where that sort of compounds. I remember being younger in this and designing spaces for our clients, and you may or may not ever get to really go experience it, but then the first time you're in the conference room having a meeting in this room that you designed, it's very powerful. And so to be part of that experience every day in an office that we all collectively had a role in is pretty great.
Yeah. What about for you, Jon? I mean,
I was hoping
you're hoping I'd forget.
Yeah, I'd hoping you'd go to a different
on
question.
This interview. No, but I think that Swiss Army knife thing is interesting, and especially with all the experience that you had of sort of development, construction, school, your theory TA. what did all that meld into? I guess maybe a high point for you, design wise or within your career, let's say.
I'll approach it. I'm gonna bring up two things. Kind of one of the first high points of my career, I'm gonna tell you, is kind of embarrassing because it was somebody told me I'm going to take over a project and I'm going to run this meeting because the project leader at the time was out sick. And the first thing I did on the project was I called the client to cancel a meeting. I'm like, we're not going to meet today. It was bad weather and I wasn't prepared. And the client called me back and said, no, we're going to meet. And he showed up in the office and we all got in a conference room and we had the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, unbeknownst to me, he went to the principal in the office at the time and said, keep Jon on the job in that role. And because I was only supposed to fill in for a little bit. And that was the first time I led a project, soup to nuts, start to finish. And that was really rewarding. The first time that you're really given the keys to the car and you didn't wreck the car is really rewarding. And
when you tried to give the keys back in the beginning and then
I don't want to
forced to take it's too much horsepower.
The other one I'm going to say is really kind of where I am in my role now. The amount of impact we have on projects and the role I think Michelle and I sit in now is much different. And we can be heavily involved in a project, from encouraging a team to go a little farther, giving the team an opportunity, fly to New York and go look at this project and see how it worked before we just haul off and do it. And that's my conservative nature too. But then getting the opportunity to walk into the project and be, wow, this really turned out amazing. And then also being the type of project where somebody's going, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee and let's go here. And you're just, because they like it. And you're then just, wow, we did really well. And knowing that you had involvement, sporadically kind of through the whole project, but it's a different kind of, wow, we're doing really good work. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that.
Yeah. So Michelle, let's go the other way. What was the lowest point in your career? Do you have a day that you remember that was the hardest? Just all good days?
It can be a roller coaster. I will say there are degrees I suppose, when the pandemic started, we had some hard times, and there were some significant challenges. I'm grateful that during those times I had Jon as a partner, and I think that's when you really realize how important a strong partnership and friendship is, because sometimes one of you is really down and the other one brings you back up, and vice versa. So those are some difficult times. When I was younger and starting my career, there were challenges just being a woman in architecture and construction, and being the only woman in the room of 20, 30 men, and just trying to navigate that as a young person starting your career. And some of the challenges that sort of occurred in construction sites and things like that, just thickening your skin and figuring out how to navigate some of those difficult issues. But I mean, I said earlier on, I mean, I am a problem solver. And I think that out of difficult things, positive things can be a result. And so, as hard as things seem, if you have an optimistic point of view, you can find the good in some of these things that are really difficult. You learn from them, you become better, you become stronger, you add more tools to your Swiss Army knife, and hopefully are better for all those really difficult things.
Right. I mean, I think, your the role you're in is not typical for a female, and I've heard from multiple people like how inspired they are by you and how you lead and work in the position you're in and being a mother. And I mean, do you have any sort of advice for other women trying to navigate all those in that career path?
You got to give yourself a break. I really think that, we, and not just women, but people in general. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to succeed, or to have, the best idea, or, to put, the strongest concept forward, or whatever it might be. It's just, there is all this stress and pressure. And, I think I was saying this to somebody the other day, when you make a decision to go to a meeting instead of something for your family, when you look back, you don't remember that call or that email or that meeting you went to, but you will remember that you didn't attend this thing for your family, or you didn't go to this meeting for your kid, or you missed their soccer game, and I think that it took me a little bit of time to realize that, but Jon and I try to remind our teams all the time is that stuff is so much more important. And when you have a strong team environment, hopefully others will pick up for you so that you can go do those things that are actually really, really meaningful and important for you as a human being, for your family. And I think it's critical to remember to put that first.
Yeah. It's so difficult. I feel like, especially this week, I've just been like crushed by multiple things, and it's like last night Rebekah was like, "You're not fun to be around. Like you're like this cold shell right now. Like you something needs to change here, And I think it's so hard to sort of pull your mind out of this task right here is the most important thing, and it has to be done, or whatever, and pull yourself back to your kids or your life or whatever. Jon, have you figured that out? Can you give me the answers, please?
In a lot of ways, it's exactly what Michelle said. It's trying to do your best to. We're not performing open heart surgery. Nobody's. If you don't get that extra detail into the set of documents, it's not the end of the world. But the hard thing is there's still art in what we do, and it's that sometimes I think solutions in our business sometimes come really quick. A lot of times they come through a journey. Sometimes that journey is not easy. And there's stress that comes into that. And there's frustration and there's differing opinions. And it's, how do you balance all that while still trying to do your best work and proceed in whatever your individual career path is, and where do you want to excel? And I really think Michelle nailed it when she said, sometimes take a step away and don't try as hard or don't put as much pressure on yourself to just kind of breathe a sigh of relief or take a deep breath. And we even started this call, take a deep breath. But the other thing I think is transparency. And I really, there are times where I do this and there are times where I forget to do it, but I really feel like I've always been rewarded when you become transparent with somebody. And that's, Michelle and I have a relationship to where we are very transparent, share our feelings. And if we're mad, we're mad. If we're stressed out, we're stressed out. And we can kind of talk to that. But even when you share it with clients, share it with colleagues, it really can transform the immediate effort that you're working on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we had two really crazy, interesting, difficult years, right? And, one thing that I could say that has come out of this is that, we were all brought into each other's homes and we all saw this different side of people. And it also made people more aware that we have lives outside of just our office, and these lives affect how we perform sometimes in our job. And there's now an opportunity to be transparent and share some of those things more openly, maybe than before.
Yeah.
Here's why I didn't get to that, and there's an understanding now, whereas maybe there wasn't so much understanding before.
Right. And I think, the issue of the pandemic is really interesting. And I think, again, Gensler as a larger organization that allows or is able to do sort of more research and more thinking that then is shared amongst the body. Let's start with John. What do you see as one of the biggest issues architecture is facing or our time is facing that maybe you're concerned about, or that you're optimistic about, sort of the power of design or architecture to address? A nice easy one for you. Softball.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's an easy one. I mean, we talk about we're at the forefront of the built environment and how can we impact our communities, but also impact the environment through what we do. So, I mean, the softball answer is we have the ability to actually do things in our work that whether our clients ask us to or not at times. And how can we benefit our, the other side of this, if it's a building, the other side of the street, or, the back side of the street or the block down, because we can, we can steer programmatic choices and orientations and suggest to our clients, hey, you should do this here or design this building to be able to accommodate this type of use from a community impact perspective. And then we can choose products that go into the building with intent that it's going to be a little more efficient or a little more performance. We, as an industry, hey, we're going to put a little bit more money into this mechanical system or the overall envelope design, and we're going to take away a little bit of the floor to ceiling glass to be able to make that affordable. So I think that's the one thing of there's really a lot of control in each and every one of us in the industry, from the most junior person on the project up to a project leader that's having the one-on-one conversations with our clients. And I think that's something that we have to talk about a little bit more in the industry, and make sure that people really understand that we are in a driver's position, and let's make the most of it.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to feel like you're in the backseat sometimes, when you're not able to be making those sort of the big decisions that make the biggest impact. But I have, from the outside, seeing that from a Gensler point of view of sort of leveraging that power or that research a little bit more. And yeah, it's been nice. Michelle, what about you? You had some time to think about it. What's a big issue you see?
Well, I mean, one of the things that almost every one of our clients is asking right now, at least our workplace clients, is how do we go back?
Right.
And what does that look like? And there isn't one single answer for everybody. It's one of the most interesting times, I think, as it relates to creating workspaces that are really enhancing the experience of its users, but also, a significant driver in the way they perform and function in their business. And, there was a time when the quantitative programs were all kind of the same. We need this many offices, we need this many conference rooms, and it was sort of driven by this more of a real estate perspective. And now it's really driven by a people perspective, and how the experience of the office really affects the people that are spending so much time there, and how that influences the way that they do their work, and how that ultimately impacts the business as a whole. So there's a whole other story about the purpose of the workplace now.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about, what sort of insights do you have into the effects of COVID and sort of the change in workplace and that change in downtowns, especially, do you have any projections about sort of how downtown buildings might change, or the use of office space? Or John, but.
Well, I mean, I'll jump in first. The office isn't going away. I still think it's, and I think it's, some of this is temporary as it relates to this whole notion of how much real estate do I need, and this and that. And there's been significant market fluctuations many times before. I mean, the interesting thing, people still want to come downtown. It's proven, not only in Denver, but in other markets. I'm affiliated with a couple of a board and a council with the Downtown Denver Partnership, and they presented the numbers, the hotel use, the weekend use, the restaurant use in our downtown is actually hitting, and at times exceeding, pre-pandemic numbers. So people are coming back downtown because they want the experience of eating in our downtown and staying in our downtown. But workers are still at 20-25% those rates. And that's going to change. Companies are going to start to say, we want you to come back. And people are going to learn that there are a lot of benefits of going back and building the community of those who you work with. But flexibility and mobility is here to stay. I don't think there's any way to not say that. If you're a dinosaur company that's going to expect your employee to be in the office from 8 to 6 every day, you're going to lose people. They're just not going to want to work for you anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think regardless of the industry or the business, that's something that we're going to contend with. And I think that's one of the beauties that Michelle and I, we work for a company that has had a people first focus. And how do we balance that people first focus with still providing the best work that we can for our clients while still making a positive impact in our communities? It's going to be unclear, and we're going to try some things and pivot. And but we're we do know, I believe, that any company is going to be a higher performing company if they have people working in the office together.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually been really fascinating to experience this at the same time that our clients are experiencing it, and and being leaders of an office going through something that our clients are going through at the exact same time has been really interesting. And we had this disruption 2 years ago, and it took us this time. There's this transition to where you get to a point where you sort of figure out, okay, this is how we're doing things. And now we are about to go through it again with people starting to return back to the office. And it won't be this perfect thing right out of the gate. We're all going to have to transition back and be agile and figuring out how to manage that transition until it gets to a point where it's starting to work well. And then, then something else will happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I saw a study, I think it was out of Gensler, New York, about, transitioning office buildings into housing, and what do you think about that, the feasibility of that and the practicalities of that? It seems like such a strong idea of bringing people back into the core more and using this space that might be underutilized, but how practical is that in your mind?
It's very practical. I mean, we've done it in Denver. I mean, 10 years ago, 1600 Glenarm is one. Red Peak Properties jumped into that. I think it was an empty office building and had been for quite some time, and they transitioned that building into a residential, and it's a very, very well-performing project. And I think it's since traded hands multiple times. It's got some amazing retail on the bottom of it. And there are other buildings just like it in town. So it's not that hard. It's just comes with some different hurdles that you get to go through, and can you afford it? And in our market, the affordability and procurement and all that kind of stuff is definitely a little trying. But I think also back to the energy performance, tearing down a building or having an empty building, still running a mechanical system that's keeping, two tenants in the building warm, you're running it across the whole building. So it's horribly inefficient. So being able to promote and push those types of transitions, I think, is paramount.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I think that idea of the sort of people first approach, I think it's easy to look from the outside of Gensler, as a sort of largest big firm, but having somebody on the inside, I've definitely seen the sort of effects of your leadership and the leadership that's set up there in the office, and just the work environment that Rebekah loves. And so I appreciate your leadership within the community, and thanks for coming on and talking.
Thanks for having us. It's nice to hear that feedback. Thanks, Adam.
Ditto. So thanks for reaching out and giving us the opportunity to listen to our voices.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Not so much.
All about yourself.
Not so much.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.
One of in the throes of the pandemic, Michelle and I were interviewing for a really big project, and there was a lot of pressure for the interview to go really well, because like anybody, people didn't know where the next project was going to come from, and this was going to be one of those whale projects in the office that would keep a large team busy for a while. And early in the interview, what you can't see on the screen right now is, at least I can't, because Michelle's camera is kind of tight in on just her head, but there's a door just off to the left of Michelle, and we're early in the interview, and the door opens and you see this hand throw something, and we didn't know what it was at the time, and it hit Michelle in the back of the head. No. And a number of people started laughing, and Michelle just kind of went like this. If she paid her daughter to do it, it was the most brilliant move ever, because it just deflated everybody in the room. Because it's like, how do you handle that? And a couple people laughed, and Michelle kind of just took a deep breath and just kept moving forward. But it just brought this reality of what we're in, and it was.
I forgot about that, because now she's in like all the meetings. If she sees it, like, ooh, can I be on the camera?
So just knowing, breaking the ice, and knowing that we're all dealing with these crazy things about working from home, and
open up this whole new realm of marketing, huh? This maybe like sympathy marketing or comedy or
Well, it really brought everybody to an equal level. I mean, there are times where when you interview, you're like, you put so much specialness on the client, or you know, and it's you put them on this pedestal, and you're really trying to woo them or this or that. But when you really boil it down, we're all the same people. We all going after the same things. I just remember.
We're all the same size little squares on the screen. Yeah.
Yes.
No one gets a bigger square.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all have our names underneath it, so nobody has to remember anybody's name ever again.
Yeah, that's funny. Michelle, I'm curious. I didn't bring it up in the interview, but you want to talk about like your brief time at Oz, where you kind of boomerang back, or do you not speak of that?
No, I mean, it's not a secret. You know, when I got to Gensler here, it just wasn't a fit, really. I mean, there isn't anything more than that. Is that, you know, I worked in that Chicago office for a little while. I have been in Chicago a long time. Friends of mine worked there. And I got here, and it was just a different experience. I wasn't a fit for them. It wasn't a fit for me. And so I was let go from the firm. And it wasn't like a huge surprise at all. I mean, I had my stuff all packed. I kind of knew, you know.
You had the files copied over, and
and so then I had a little bit of time off. I mean, it was also scary, you know. I was 2009. It was not a great time to be looking for a job. Wow. I had just moved here, bought a house, you know, so it was a little scary, but I got a job at Oz, and I had a really great experience there. Some really great people, and worked on a few pretty fun little projects. And then I got a call from Walter Hunt, who was one of the, I'd say, had a very strong legacy with the firm. I think Walter was like one of the fourth or fifth employees, I think.
And he started the Denver office.
He started the Denver office. And he called me, and he's like, I want you to come back to Gensler. And I kind of always knew that somehow Gensler would be part of my future again, you know, but I didn't want to go back to the firm if it was exactly how it was when I left, because I didn't want to go back, you know, and it still not be a fit. But the office was in the middle of a transition, and so the timing made sense. And that was really where Jon and I's friendship kind of started, was that second time around. And I'd say that, you know, when you think about a co-leadership, you know, ours is unique to me in the sense is that it was just really through this series of unexpected opportunities that we just over the years started performing these complementary functions, you know, and it just organically occurred.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, over 22 years or 15 years, you know, for what your role is in the company changes. And, you know, when we were going into the Great Recession, I was not calling the shots at all. And I just remember going, that was the dumbest decision when they let Michelle go. But, and we've talked about this since, you know, when she came back, I think she came back better, stronger, more, she knew our market. And I think she was able to make a huge impact coming back much quicker than had we potentially not let her go. And I think it's
see, good things happen
Yeah.
from bad things.
Yeah.
so, and
Right.
every company, every firm, you know, there's high points and low points, and there's evolution that's going to occur. I mean, we're 49 years this year as an office in Denver, and that's part of our evolution, you know. And when we were rebounding, when Michelle came back, we started to rebound out of the recession, and that's when we became part of the leadership team, which evolved into us co-managing the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I've always sort of been curious about this. You know, obviously, I'm pretty close with Blake Moyer and sort of his time there at Gensler, and it seemed like they're kind of after the recession, there's maybe a big kind of leadership change where like young spry guys like yourself, Jon, sort of took over, and you know, I mean, the leadership of the firm is relatively young, right? Like Brent has a lot of gray hair, but he's not that old, probably, I think. And you know, yeah, what did it feel like that at a certain point where sort of a younger group rose into leadership somehow, and you know, you've been able to kind of keep that core for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I think all good firms have some consistency, and that's something I think we have a lot of, and we a lot of people stay here for a long time, but at some point careers end, and that was part of being one of the oldest offices of the firm. You know, we're going to turn 49 later this year, and we had some principals that were starting, you know, looking to retire and do that. So we not only are we going through the Great Recession, we started to have a leadership succession in the office. And, you know, when we took on those leadership roles, there were a lot of other people below us taking on different leadership roles. And we talked a lot about, we were all growing and evolving. And that doesn't happen overnight either. It took us a number of years. And I remember a client mentioning, I think his quote was, "It's been really fun to watch, and you can tell that you're starting to hit your stride." And that wasn't a personal comment. That was a comment about our office. And
right,
it's great. Now we've got this consistency, and we've diversified so much in terms of project types and the different things that we're doing. It's really exciting. And I think we've got an opportunity to just take it to the next level.
Yeah. Cool.
You can edit that one out.
Where I said cool. Yeah.
No, the whole thing.
No. Yeah. And yeah, you guys, if you guys want to listen to this before it comes out, I can do that. But I don't know if Jon, you wanted me to edit out the interview part, but I'm not. But
no, it's true. I mean, I do know that we have said that to each other.
You know, Jon's literal words when we were sitting there together with Rebekah was, he said, "I don't know if I can legally say this, but do I have to hire both of you?"
What? I don't know this story. So you guys were both interviewing at the exact same time.
Yeah. So we moved to Denver, and I like this podcast. I just loved sort of reaching out to people and connecting with people, and so I reached out to Jon pretty early, and he was great to you know, he connected with us pretty early on, months before he moved here, and yeah, so we both came. I think we said like, "Hey, you want to grab some coffee?" And we both came to the office, and and you know, we were both going through our portfolios, and Rebekah has like this nice hospital from Caesar Pelle's office, and she has this like transport hub, and then I have like this border town on the border of U.S. and Mexico, where it's connected by a roller coaster, where you go from life to death, and you can choose which side of the border you're born on, and you can choose which prescription drugs you have based on which side you're on, or what kind of surgeries you want to have. And then there's this. It ends in a cemetery, and John. That's when John's like, "Do I have to hire both of you?" Or,
well, in all candidness, we only had one position. And we wanted to hire Becca, and they were like, is it a 2-for-1 deal?
Yeah, and the roller coaster hospital didn't help. So, no, it worked.
We actually,
because
Brent.
I feel like I remember this now. This was like this. You guys were like the wonderkind couple or something. Where it was like it was.
We
like
wanted to hire both.
These amazingly talented couple. Yeah. Now I remember.
We had a lot of dialogue. Like,
John sent you a text and said, "Hey, say that they're both talented." Yeah.
No, I think I remember this now because it was, and it's not easy to have. Yeah, I mean, we do have married people in the office, but it's not everybody.
Yeah. No, we
that path.
Yeah, we weren't gonna end in the same spot. I mean, we were a little different because we had a firm together before and stuff, but
yeah, that work that was in your portfolio was really good. I mean, that
sounds amazing. Actually,
I remember both sides of that going, wow. I mean, because that's the impressive part. I mean, you guys had your own firm doing things when people, you're running a business and handling those kind of things and handling clients and stuff when your peers weren't. So there's a lot of really good things that you learned along the way, and a lot of problems that you faced, both of you, along the way, that people may never learn working for a larger office, depending on what their growth and responsibility level gets to.
Yeah, and I think it goes both ways. Like, I definitely lost out on a lot of things. Sort of went directly to being a firm owner and never had like the intern stage. So yeah, pros and cons. But
here's one of the things I will say, Adam, is that, and you know this probably from having your business in the past, is that you do have to accept that part of your job will not be design and architecture anymore. You kind of have to set time aside, knowing that I'm going to be doing stuff that is HR and risk management and contracts and all this stuff that is maybe not the funnest part, but will eventually be, as satisfying as some of the other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think my time teaching has also been really helpful there, where I'm sort of used to having like 12 projects going on where I'm commenting and directing, and I really love that. And it's like kind of like that more than me like having to draw every 12 projects, but right now I just don't have any of those students working for me yet, so I can't have that.
I think
you guys take interns.
Once we have more money, I would take some. Yeah.
I mean, what we do is really hard, is something that we say, and I think it doesn't matter if you're a one-man show or a partnership or 6-person firm or an 80-person firm. It's hard. I mean, just designing a building is hard, and all the technical stuff and getting a permit, but then managing the business is hard, and the people issues are hard. I mean, what we do is really hard.
Yeah. Hard and mostly fun.
Yeah. I wouldn't be doing it if we didn't enjoy it.
I heard one architect told me it's like, what do you say? Architecture is 25% fun, but that 25% makes it worth it. Something like that. Maybe more.
My favorite part is, I was going to say, my favorite part's when something's getting built. And in a lot of ways, that's the longest part of the project process. So depending on where your true passion lies, you can also, I would argue that in some ways more than 25% is
Yeah.
fun.
Depends where you're working. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Well,
All right.
thanks for coming on.